We are in Acts 21. And Paul is going to go on his way to Jerusalem. And this is where things really change in the book of Acts. Um, this will be focusing mostly on Paul um, from now on till the end of the book of Acts. So I'm going to read from 21, verse 1 to 16, and we'll talk about it, okay? And when we had parted from them and set sail, we came by a straight course to Kos, and the next day to Rhodes, and from there to Patara. And having found a ship crossing to Phoenicia, we went aboard and set sail. When we had come in sight of Cyprus, leaving it on the left, we sailed to Syria and landed at Tyre, for there the ship was to unload its cargo. And having sought out the disciples, we stayed there for 7 days, and through the Spirit they were telling Paul not to go on to Jerusalem. When our days there were ended, we departed and went on our journey, and they all with wives and children accompanied us until we were outside the city. And kneeling down on the beach, we prayed and said farewell to one another, and then we went on board the ship, and they returned home. When we had finished the voyage from Tyre, we arrived in Ptolemais, and we greeted the brothers and stayed with them for 1 day. On the next day we departed and came to Caesarea, and we entered the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. He had 4 unmarried daughters who prophesied. While we were staying for many days, a prophet named Agabus came down from Judea. And coming to us, he took Paul's belt and bound his own feet and hands and said, "Thus says the Holy Spirit, this is how the Jews at Jerusalem will bind the man who owns this belt and deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles." And when we heard this, we and the people there urged him not to go up to Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, "What are you doing, weeping and breaking my heart? For I am ready not only to be imprisoned, but to die in Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." And since he would not be persuaded, we ceased. And he said, "Let the will of the Lord be done." After these days we got ready and went up to Jerusalem. And some of the disciples from Caesarea went with us, bringing us to the house of Mnason of Cyprus, an early disciple with whom we should lodge. So what did you guys like about what we read here?
I like that they had people there ready to greet them when they arrived.
Oh, yes.
The word is traveling faster than they are.
That's right. That's right, Tamara. And now you picked up on something. These just weren't believers. Believers actually become family, which is really cool. Really cool. Anything else you guys liked?
That they prophesied over him and told him not to go to Jerusalem, and he was like, "I'm going anyway. I'm ready to go
Yeah.
to jail if I have to. But I got to tell you what I know.
Yeah.
I need to tell them."
Very good. Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Is there anything in here that you guys didn't like? Were you going to say something, Steve?
I don't like that they're attacking Paul for spreading the gospel. I guess that's the whole thing of Acts. I guess is what they're talking about. How they attacked Paul the whole voyage, right?
Well, they weren't on in this one here. I don't think they were attacking him.
No. They were warning him not to go because he will be attacked.
That's right. That's right. And what part of it didn't you like? That he was willing to go, or that they were warning him?
They were kind of warning him, which was good, but he was going to do it anyways.
Yeah.
It didn't matter the warning or not.
Yeah. That's interesting. Paul's not a stupid man. He's actually a very good planner. And we're going to see, I don't know if it's in this chapter or it's probably the next chapter, why he wanted to go to Jerusalem. Really kind of cool, though. Is there anything in here that you guys didn't understand?
Weren't they around Tyre before?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, it was just familiar to me.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about two people here. And they entered the house of Philip the evangelist, who was one of the 7, and stayed with him. What were the 7? Do you guys remember? Turn back to Acts chapter 6. Okay. And you see the title for Acts chapter 6. What does that title say?
The chosen 7.
The chosen 7, or the 7 chosen to serve. These were the very first 7 deacons of the church. So this Philip is still a deacon in the church, and he's an evangelist. There's one famous deacon in the church in Acts chapter 7, and he was the very first Christian martyr. Do you know who he was? Remember who he was?
Stephen?
Stephen. That's right. That's right. So Stephen was killed, but Philip was not. There's another person I want to bring attention to. Verse 16. Mnason of Cyprus. What's unique about Mnason of Cyprus? What does the Bible say about him?
He is a disciple of long standing.
Yeah. Does anyone else say it a little different?
Early believers.
An
Yeah.
early believer.
An early believer. So, pardon me, Steve?
My book says early disciple.
Yeah, because you went and bought yourself a nice ESV Bible, didn't you?
Yeah, same as yours.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Mm-hmm. An early,
the Living Translation.
yeah. So an early disciple or an early believer, what can we conjure from that? When do you think he became a believer if he's an early disciple? Okay, what area was Mnason from?
Cyprus.
Cyprus. Let's go back to Acts chapter 2.
He saw the ascension.
And it says in verse 8, and how is it that we each hear, each of us in our own native language, Parthians and Medes and the Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and and all these places. So chances are, not every nation was listed here, but this Manasseh was most likely saved at Pentecost. Pretty interesting. One of the very first believers, a believer before Paul was a believer. Really kind of cool. Out of what we read here and what we discussed, what does this tell us about Jesus?
He's believable.
Say that again, Tamara.
I said he's believable.
Okay. How do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, just that everything that he's done and how the truth and the word is spreading, it's creating new followers and new believers, and it's just growing, growing, growing.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, very good. Anyone else? Okay, well, let's keep reading here. And we'll read verse 17 to verse 26. When we had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went in with us to James, and all the elders were present. After greeting them, he related one by one the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified God, and they said to him, "You see, brother, how many thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed. They are all zealous for the law, and they have been told about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to our customs. What then is to be done? They will certainly hear that you have come. Do therefore what we tell you. We have 4 men who are under a vow. Take these men and purify yourselves along with them and pay their expenses, so that they may shave their heads. Thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have been told about you, that you yourself also live in observance to the law. But as for the Gentiles who have believed, we have sent a letter with our judgment, that they should abstain from what has been sacrificed to idols, and from blood, and from what has been strangled, and from sexual immorality. Then Paul took the men, and the next day he purified himself along with them, and went into the temple, giving notice when the days of purification would be fulfilled, and the offering presented for each one of them. So what did you guys like about what we read here? This one's a little technical, but what did you like? I'm going to grab some water. Is there anything that you guys liked? Okay, is there anything that you didn't like?
I like that you went to Jerusalem anyways.
Yeah. So I want to point something out to you guys. You notice the Holy Spirit wasn't warning him not to go. The Holy Spirit was letting him know this is what's going to await you if you do go. And he decided to go anyway. God was giving him a choice whether to go or not. I want you to pay attention to that. You guys have heard me go through the seven realities of experiencing God. I've done it a few times. I'll talk about it again. Number 1, God is always at work around you. Number 2, God pursues a real intimate love relationship with you. Number 3, God invites you to join him in his work. Number 4, God speaks to you through the Bible, through prayer, through circumstances, and through the church. Number 5, there are some things that you need to adjust in your life. Number 6, you're going to have a crisis of belief, meaning what God's asking you to do is going to be very scary. And number 7, which is the most important, is you go in obedience. And then because you obey, God works through you. So here's the crisis of belief. Paul wants to go. God's saying, okay, if you want to go, no, this is what's going to happen to you. He said, I still want to go. I know that's waiting for me, but I'm going to go anyway. Paul did spend a lot of time in jail. You know what's really interesting about that? We have what's called the prison epistles. We have Philippians, Colossians, and I think 1st and 2nd Timothy. Definitely Philemon. Were all written while Paul was in jail. If Paul wasn't in jail, those would not have been written. And God used that obedience to how many millions upon millions of people came to Christ because of those letters written in prison, because Paul decided to step out on faith and go to Jerusalem, even though he knew he'd be persecuted. Really kind of interesting. So there's a lot of technicalities in this one, both vows and things like that. Is there anything you didn't understand about that?
Yeah, I had something I didn't understand.
Yeah.
The purification ceremony, are they
Mhm.
talking about baptism?
That's a great
And why
question.
are they shaving their heads?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's actually talking about the Nazirite vow, and I think that's number 17. Um, let's go to Numbers. No, that's in staff. I'm just trying to find. Okay, laws for purification. That's kind of. Um, trying to find the Nazirite vow here. No. Anyway, where is it here? The Nazirite vow. It's in the book of Numbers. I thought it was number 17, but I could be wrong. rebellion. Use the priests and Levites. Maybe it's further on. I want to find this for you.
Just while you're looking for that,
Yeah.
I had messaged Lucas earlier, like as we started Bible study, and asked him if he was joining, and he just messaged me back, and he asked me to invite him, so I did.
Okay, great. Oh, so he was out of the group?
I guess so.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay. Oh, maybe the Nazarite vow was earlier on. Arrangement of camp. Maybe it's chapter 7. Sometimes I get Numbers and Leviticus mixed up. Chapter 6. Here we are. Here we are. Get my chapters mixed up a little bit between Leviticus and Numbers. Okay, so here's the Nazarite vow. It says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when either a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of a Nazarite, to separate himself to the Lord, he shall separate himself from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar made from wine or strong drink, and shall not drink any juice of grapes, or eat grapes, fresh or dried, all the days of his separation. He shall eat nothing that is produced by the grapevine, not even the seeds or skins. All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall touch his head until the time is completed for which he separates himself to the Lord. He shall be holy. He shall let the locks of his head grow long. All the days that he separates himself to the Lord, he shall not go near a dead body, not even for his father or mother or brother, because he is separate to the Lord, because his separation to God is on his head. All the days of his separation is holy to the Lord. And if a man, it just goes in how to separate. And a Nazarite vow was a special vow. And so when the vow is over, you shave your head and you clean yourself and you offer sacrifices. And so these men, their vow was over. So to show that their vow was over, they shaved their heads and they washed themselves as a purification. And then there were certain sacrifices they had to make. So as they went to Jerusalem, Paul going with these people, it would show that either their vow was completed or their vow just started because of their shaved heads. And it would give them credibility, showing that they are adhering to the law, because Numbers is part of the law, right? Did that answer your question, Tamara?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. The Nazarite law is a really interesting law. I did a TikTok video on it. It was really interesting. Got a lot of views. Anyway, is there any other things that you may not have understood on? Okay. Well, this is really interesting. I want you guys to notice this. Now, who wrote the book of Acts? Do you guys remember?
Luke?
Luke. Okay. Now, do you guys remember Luke's occupation?
It's a doctor.
Doctor. Very good. Now, I want you to read how 21:1 starts. And when we had parted from them and set sail, we came by a straight course to Kos. Okay? So would Luke be included with that we?
Think so.
Yes. Okay. Verse 17, when we had come to Jerusalem, the brothers received us gladly. Would Luke be part of that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
That's why I asked at first of it who wrote this,
Yeah,
so I can understand who we and us was.
yeah. I want to put that into your minds here because of what's coming up next. Now, some of you who are more experienced in the faith might pick up on it. Those of you who aren't, you won't even see it, not until I point it out to you. Verse 27. When the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple. Now, where did they see him? In the temple. Stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help. This is the man who is teaching everyone everywhere against the people and the law and this place. Pay attention. Moreover, he even brought Greeks into the temple and has defiled this holy place. For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. Then all the city was stirred up, and the people ran together. They seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and at once the gates were shut. And as they were seeking to kill him, word came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. He at once took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them, and when they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the tribune came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. He inquired who he was and what he had done. Some in the crowd were shouting one thing, some another, and as he could not learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered him to be brought into the barracks. And when he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because the violence of the crowd, for the mob of the people followed, crying out, Away with him. That's pretty intense. So what did you like about what we read here?
That he was bringing everybody to God, all the different people.
Okay, yeah, I can see that because they're saying these Jews were saying, "Hey, this is the guy that's turned the world upside down." That's a good observation. What else did you guys like? Okay, what didn't you like?
The persecution.
Yeah.
Persecution is pretty bad on this one. So, big question. Why did the persecution happen according to this?
Because he was bringing people into the temple that weren't supposed to be there.
You're right.
Or
And what kind of people were they?
Greek.
Greeks. Now, did he actually bring them in?
No.
No. Okay. Is there anything else that you guys didn't like? Okay. Anything you didn't understand? Okay, so I want to share something with you here. It is something that you guys probably did not see at all. How many of you have been a Christian for more than 5 years? Just let me know.
I have.
You have? Okay. Anyone else?
Ding
I think
ding.
Okay. Okay. How many of you were taught that Luke was a Gentile? Did anyone taught that? Was Luke with Paul the whole time?
No, he wasn't one of the originals.
Oh no, he's not an original disciple or apostle.
Yeah. Yeah.
But was he with Paul, not Jesus, but Paul the whole time in this story?
I think so.
Yeah. So when Paul went into the temple, who else went into the temple?
Luke.
Luke, which would mean like Greek, like non-Jewish people were not allowed in that part of the temple. They would be executed for that.
So Luke's a Greek?
No, a lot of people say that Luke is a Greek, but because Luke went into the temple with Paul, he's a Jew.
Oh.
Okay. So now, this is one thing I wanted to show you here. Every person, everybody that God used to write this Bible, every single one of them was a Jew, even in the New Testament, except for one person. You know who that one person is? Turn to Daniel chapter 4.
Can you repeat that question, Jason, right there? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
fine. I said, this whole Bible, every single person that wrote this Bible was a Jew. There's one little piece where a non-Jew wrote in the Bible. One little piece. And it is Daniel chapter 4. Now, I want to read this to you. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar, to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show you the signs and wonders that the Most High God has done for me. Now, if you go and read this whole chapter, well, basically up to verse 18, this part of the Bible, God allowed a Gentile to write it. And it's actually this man's testimony on how he became a believer. That's the only Gentile that ever wrote in the Bible was Nebuchadnezzar. So when people tell you that Luke was a Gentile, he was not. His occupation was a doctor, and people think he was a Gentile because he was a doctor. I know a lot of Jewish doctors. To me, that's very interesting. Luke's a Jew. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 37. As Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the tribune, "May I say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek?" Are you not the Egyptian then who recently stirred up a revolt and led the 4,000 men of the assassins out into the wilderness? Paul replied, I am a Jew from Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no obscure city. I beg you, permit me to speak to the people. And when he had given him permission, Paul, standing on the steps, motioned with his hands to the people. And when there was a great hush, he addressed them in Hebrew. And we will stop there. And we'll pick up next week. Because now we go right into chapter 22. But what, as we look at this, what does this tell us about Jesus? This whole story tonight, what does this tell us about Jesus? You guys there? You guys hear me? Did I freeze up?
Yeah, yeah, we're good.
Okay. Let me put it this way. What was prophesied that would happen in Jerusalem to Paul, did it happen?
Absolutely. Yes.
What is more important to Jesus? Your testimony about him or the persecution against you?
Persecution.
Okay, let's talk about it. Gina, I think I phrased that question wrong.
Okay. I just came back. Sorry, I had a phone call.
Okay. Jesus, let me put it this way. Jesus does care if you're persecuted. But what's more important for Jesus? That you obey him
Oh, that is, yeah,
in sharing the gospel or
yes.
avoid persecution.
No, you're supposed to share the gospel.
Okay. We talked about something awesome that happened because of this persecution. Paul was thrown into jail because after this he pleads to go to Rome. And we'll look into that. And he gets sentenced to jail. And while he's in jail, he wrote a bunch of the New Testament epistles while in jail. And if it didn't start with his one act by going to Jerusalem, he would never be in jail in order to have enough time on his hands to write these letters to these churches, like the Philippians, like the Colossians, like the letter of Philemon. Really interesting. So what we can gain from all of this tonight is Jesus wants you to preach his word. And he wants you to be reckless with it. Meaning, not reckless in your theology, but reckless in your safety. Jesus did not come down here to protect himself from being injured or persecuted. It was quite the contrary. Being persecuted is not fun, but it helps teach us the will of God. Romans 12, 1 and 2. Are you guys living fearlessly? Are you living recklessly? Fully abandoned to God for the gospel? I'm going to turn this off now. We'll have question and answer time. Okay.